thanks for the opportunity to speak on the energy issue for a few minutes in this second stage debate. Firstly, to say that I do support the bill, and I do acknowledge, as others have mentioned on both sides of the House, that the issue of energy prices and energy costs, fuel costs in general, is now one of the biggest issues that's facing the citizens of the country, and will be for the foreseeable future, because while many previous speakers have outlined the increases that have taken place in the last few months, it's quite clear that the outlook and the projections for the next 6 months are similarly in an upward trajectory. While supporting the bill and supporting its measure in relation to reduction in electricity costs for individuals and families right across the country, I would hope that it or a similar mechanism can be used in the future to ensure that the particular spike that we're seeing at the moment isn't all transferred onto the backs of families and citizens right across the country. However, in my time in public life, I don't think we've ever really in Ireland had an honest and open debate about energy policy. And while I disagree with many of the points made by Deputies Murphy and Boyd Barrett, they certainly put forward their points of view with their usual eloquence and energy. I don't particularly agree with Deputy Cowan necessarily that the privatisation of the ESB is the right thing to consider at this particular point in time. But at least he put forward his position, and I think everything in the current climate needs to be discussed. And what the opposition failed in any of their criticisms of Deputy Cowan to outline is they're attacking the ESB, they're attacking other energy providers for the cost at which they're providing energy, but they're not really providing any alternatives. And for too often in this House and in other chambers across the country, politicians of all stripes, but particularly of the left and the far left, have portrayed that there are easy options in relation to energy. What do I mean by that? I mean, at the moment in Ireland, I think the Corrib gas field, for example, provides 40% of our gas. I would say that there's a considerable amount of opposition to its development within this chamber, with no ready alternative being proposed. I question and criticise the decision of the government to close the peat generation factories, not because peat generation should be sustained indefinitely into the future, but because it was done in advance of securing what the alternative would be. And the government has been slow, and I'm not trying to portray the image that microgeneration will solve all of our energy needs. But there were commitments given both in the programme for government and when the government was formed in terms of targets for connections, for people seeing rebates when they were supplying into the grid rather than taking out of it, which I know Minister Ryan is now talking about reaching, but about a year after the original projection was. And I don't know who it was saying it earlier on, if we're to, I think it might have been Deputy Boyd Barrett, but somebody else, if we're to bring the public with us in terms of what needs to be done in terms of energy production, then small wins in terms of microgeneration, in terms of alternatives, need to be secured. I welcome the fact that it's happening, but it should have happened a lot sooner. I also think all of this issue flows into the area of planning policy. I mean, virtually every roof we have in the country should have a solar panel on it, if it can at all. And certainly in my part of the country, in the southeast, we have a nickname for having more sunshine than most other parts of the country. But if you're installing, whether you're a business or a private dwelling, if you're installing a flush solar panel with your roof, that shouldn't have to go through the full rigours of the planning system, in my view. And I welcome Minister Burke and his colleagues in terms of their initiatives with regard to reviewing planning legislation. Because, again, it's another method of ensuring that we can bring the public with us. We also have to realise, and I mentioned earlier on, that 40% of our gas comes from the Corrib field. But we're on the end of the European gas pipeline, and issues and factors far beyond our control, issues that are now current in Eastern Europe, will have an impact on energy into the future. But it always disappoints me when I see every public representative has the right to oppose and object and express their view on development, whether it's in the energy field or in any other field. But it is completely false to present to the public that there are soft options in terms of energy supply, because there aren't. And one of the things that particularly bothered me, Minister Ryan's letter to An Bord Pleanála recently with regard to the LNG plant in Kerry or Limerick. It's accepted by many experts in the field of energy as well as in climate that LNG is going to be a transitionary fuel for years and years to come. We have already in this country outlawed fracking, and I voted for it and accept it and agree with it. But LNG that's produced from other sources, to be able to refine it here in this country and to distribute it and not be dependent on our neighbour in the United Kingdom, to give us a level of energy security that we don't have. I just think it's wrong for our National Minister for Energy to get himself involved in an individual planning application. I know he has strong views, and by all means he should express them. But when it comes to an individual application by a private business, I don't think it's presenting the full picture to the general public. I agree, shockingly, with Deputy Boyd Barrett and others in relation to VAT and excise and factors that are within the control of the government in terms of easing the cost of energy and fuel. I've never been a particular supporter of nuclear energy. Perhaps it's because I grew up near enough to Carnsore, and it was always a topical issue. But we've never had a proper reasoned debate about, is that something in Ireland in the future that could be a sustainable form of energy that should be considered, and a rational debate upon it. So thank you, Concordia. I support the aims of this bill, and I hope that it can be used in the future to provide similar relief for families across the country. Thank you very much.